This week we are learning a new program. Some of you may already have experience with it and some of you might be brand new, but that's okay. We're going to be using Illustrator. And Illustrator is a vector-based program. So we've been using Photoshop so far, and that's a pixel-based program. Basically, the main difference, pixels are squares of information, color information, and opacity. And those squares are scaled if you go to scale your image up. So a lot of times, you might take this awesome photo and then realize it's kind of tiny, and when you go to scale it, then it becomes pixelated. You can see all the individual squares or pixels. Well, Illustrator solves that problem. Illustrator is a mathematical equation between points. So, I'm not going to get too in-depth about it. Basically, anytime you make a curve, it knows the equation of that curve, and if you scale it up or down, it keeps that equation, just makes it bigger or smaller. So let's take a look at Illustrator. Okay, it's very, very similar to Photoshop. All of the Adobe software is pretty similar. So you've got your toolbar, same kind of stuff, text tool, type tool, your selection tools, magic wand, pen tool, all those kinds of things. There are tons and tons of different chapters and activities in your book, and then there are also some tutorials on the website that you could look at. And of course, feel free to always email me if you have any questions. I'd love to help out. So let's take a look at some of these tools. Most of the time with Illustrator, you're going to use the pen tool. But this can get a little bit complicated. So let's start with a little bit of a more simple tool. Your shape tool. So we've got the rectangle tool, and then if you hold down, you can see we've got a bunch of shapes underneath it. Now with these tools, you'll have your color kind of set up here. You can just click and drag to create whatever shape that you want. Okay? And we can use our selection tool, which is the top black arrow, or you can hit V on your keyboard. And what that allows us to do is move our shape. Let me make it a different color so we can kind of see what's going on. Okay, so I can click and drag my selection tool. I can go to the corners, click and drag to create different shapes. You can just do the edge. If you do hold shift and click and drag on a corner, it will keep it to proportion no matter how you click. So this, your main selection tool looks at the object as a whole. Now if you go next to it, we have your direct selection tool. If we click on that and click on our shape, you'll see we don't have those boxes like we did before. This tool allows you to move specific anchor points. Okay, so anchor points are these little boxes, and actually now with the newer illustrators, it tells you, it says anchor in that green lettering. We're on a path. The anchor is the end point. So if you click on an anchor, click and let go, it's actually selected. And then I can click and drag, and I'm just taking that one point. So you can now take your shapes and create completely new shapes with it. Maybe we've got some of that Nike swish that we were talking about in the discussion board. All sorts of different things. So I'm going to delete that one. If you're in your direct selection tool and you hit delete, you're deleting that one anchor point. But if you click on the selection tool, you can grab the shape again as a whole and hit delete, and the whole thing will go away. Now, for your assignment, you're also going to want to look at the paintbrush tool, the blob brush tool, and the pencil. The paintbrush and the pencil, you can just freehand draw and create shapes or characters however you want. And then you can change the color. It's used with the stroke color, not with the fill color. So we can double click on the stroke color. You can change it to whatever you want and paint this way. Or if you've already created the shape and you want to change it, you can click on it after the fact and then go to your stroke color and change it. Now, when we use our direct selection tool, you'll notice that we've just created a path, and it has anchor points, and it's just one line. You can click and drag and change specific points along the way. So if you don't like what you created, you can still go back and change it. So I'm going to go back to my selection tool so I can click and select everything and delete it. Now, now let's take a look at the blob brush in comparison to your paintbrush tool. I'll start by just drawing a squiggly line with the paintbrush. Let's zoom in, and then I'll do a line with the blob brush next to it. Okay, they're basically the same thing, except the paintbrush, remember, is just that one path, that one line down the middle. And when you use the blob brush, it's actually outlining your stroke, so kind of creating a closed path. So if I use my direct select tool, I can see that I actually have 2 anchor points at the bottom. So I can click and drag, and now I'm changing the width of my actual stroke instead of the direction. Now you can always grab multiple anchor points, hold shift, and you can click and drag them both, but it's a closed path instead of this one line open path. So you'll have lots of opportunities this week to play around in Illustrator and learn the tools and get more comfortable with them. And then we have the pencil as well, and that's very similar to the paintbrush. So be sure to check that one out. But I want to explain to you these anchor points and paths a little bit more. So if we look at the pen tool, it's a little tricky when you start, but it'll be fine. So if we click and let go, you create an anchor point. Okay? And then you're going to move your mouse, and you can click and drag. Don't let go. And you can change the shape of the line that you're making. Remember, these are those paths and equations that Illustrator's so good with. So if we click and drag, you can just make different shapes, whatever you want. But at the end, if you click where you started, you can see under my mouse I have a circle. I'm actually going to close the path off. So now this is a complete shape that I can fill in if I wanted using the paint bucket tool, just like in Photoshop, all that kind of stuff. It's a closed path. An open path would be one where I just draw some shape, but then I don't actually finish it. It's open. You can't fill this in because Illustrator doesn't know how when there's an opening. You just have a line. So if I were to do a fill color, let's say like that, if I do the same thing on my open path, you'll see it doesn't finish. So this one, to show more of an extreme of what I'm talking about, it's going to connect your final two, but you don't have a stroke. And you can't create, if I wanted a smooth shape, it's going to just do the shortest distance between the 2 points, the hypotenuse of the shape. And if you start to do kind of intertwining path shapes, it's going to get a little confused. So it doesn't work exactly the way you might think it would. So when that happens, you might need to do multiple shapes to create what you're looking for, or make sure to close your path. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the pen tool. So I have this example from your book, and I would just suggest that you take either a basic drawing that you've done or a picture of something that you have, something simple that you can kind of try to outline using the pen tool. Practice is really going to make perfect when it comes to this tool, so you just want to start easy and move from there. So I've got this carrot. I'll start at the bottom here. Well, let me put a new layer so that we don't keep doing that. So your layers, Illustrator puts everything in one layer. Okay, you can create separate ones and we still can lock and all that kind of stuff. But all of your little pieces and shapes are all going to be part of one layer. So I will click and let go. And then you can decide how far you want to go with the pen tool. You never want to do points, super, super close together, because then it will just start to look like a jagged line. And the whole point about using Illustrator is you can get these awesome curves. But sometimes if you use too much space, you're unable to get the multiple bends and curves of the actual shape. So it's a fine line you have to play around with. But you can either do halfway through the carrot or kind of at the top here. I'm just going to do halfway for now. So we click and drag and you try to match the black line and then let go. You can see I have handles here. A lot of times people get confused and think this is part of your path, but that's actually your handles. That's saying how far is my line going, what direction is it going to go to. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. So then I'll click and drag to finish my carrot top. Okay, now you can see I'm dragging that anchor point to get the curve that I want. But if I leave my anchor point out that far, when I go to make my next point, see how big that shape is? I won't be able to get the curve that I want. So what I actually have to do is when I click and drag and get the shape that I'm actually looking for, I have to hold Alt on my keyboard. And what that does is it breaks the handles so you can point this handle in the direction that you're going. You don't need to pull it out far. You just want to have a little space showing in the direction that you're moving. That way we can finish our path down here and then close our path. Whoops. Create a nice shape. With the pen tool, it moves your actual artboard so that you can get the curve that you want. To show another example of what I'm talking about by holding Alt on the keyboard, try to create an M. So if I click and let go, and I click on the same line and drag up, and then I go to click on the same line, you can see it's going in the complete wrong direction. But if I grab my pen tool, click and let go, click drag, but then hold Alt and say, hey, pen tool, I'm going to go in an upward direction. And then I let go. When I go to do the next one, I can create the second hump of the M. So again, play around with the pen tool and please let me know. I would be glad to do, a longer, a more in-depth intro to Illustrator or using the pen tool. Okay, so we've got your text tool, your type tool. It's very similar to Photoshop's. You can click and then type whatever you want. All of your character, font size, all that stuff is up here. Or you can go to Window and then Type. And then we've got character for the actual type. Paragraph is for the leading, the spacing between, all that kind of stuff. You've got an eraser, your pencil, just to demonstrate. You've got to give it some sort of a color. There we go. And you can edit the stroke with these. Pencil, pen, let's crank it up. So that's how you achieve different thickness of your brush. You can grab your eraser and erase right through it. Creates different shapes that you can now edit with your direct selection tool. Now, see if I go to edit this, I can move the anchor points, but I can also click on the handles and edit those as well. So you can really get crazy with different shapes in Illustrator. and layering things. There's a lot of different stuff to do. So I would really take this week to explore the different tools, have fun, get creative. You have to turn in one document, just of a design piece that you did, and then you also have to do this 25 boxes. So you're just supposed to fill each box with a different tool or thing that you created. Try to make it look as nice as you can. I mean, it's fun to explore different things and have all different pieces, but try to find one element that unifies the whole thing. You know, this is a learning exercise, but I'd also love for it to be a piece that you could use in your portfolio. So I know there's an awful lot to learn. Again, please let me know if you need help with anything, and I can't wait to see what you guys can do in Illustrator. Have a good one.